Endurance Junkie Podcast, episode 109. Hey Junkies, how are you doing? My name is Peter and thanks for joining me on a new episode of the Endurance Junkie Podcast, the show where I will be interviewing some of the fastest, smartest and most inspiring people active in the endurance world today. Now, if you like these little interviews and don't want to miss any future episodes, just head over to the subscription page on the website, junkiepodcast.com/subscribe for a step-by-step walkthrough on how to subscribe and automatically receive the latest episode directly on your computer or your mobile device. The show is also on Spotify, so if that's your preferred medium, just search for Endurance Junkie Podcast in the search bar and you will find me no problem. Also, feel free to join me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter if you want to discuss or leave your comments. My handle is @JunkiePodcast on all platforms, so it should be nice and easy for us to connect. Right, on today's show we have Stephen Hyde, and Stephen is a reigning US cyclo-cross champion. Now, Stephen believes in being a student of the sport in all aspects, physically, mentally and emotionally. Now, you may have seen him race on the road or on the mountain bike, but his true passion is cyclo-cross, as it seems to fit well with his skill set on the bike, but also because it somehow strikes a chord on a much deeper level. So hi Stephen, thanks for coming on the show. Now, for those of us who don't know you, can you maybe start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your sporting background and how you got into cyclo-cross?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me first. My name's Stephen Hyde. I'm 30 and I race for Canadale cyclo-crossworld.com. I'm the now two-time national champion for the US in cyclo-cross, two-time continental champion as well. And been racing pro cross now for 4 years. I was a professional on the road before that and during this as well with Estella's. I got my start with Estella Cycling, Estella's Pro Cycling. Then I went to Silence Canadale, and I kind of started on the Jam Fund, which is a New England-based cyclocross program out of Western Massachusetts. Originally from Florida, though. Started down in Pensacola, Florida, born and raised down there, and got into cycling through that. I was a BMX kid. I did a lot of, ramp, park, street trails, dirt jumps, stuff like that, for a very long time. And got into bike shops in high school and kind of went from there. I always loved mountain biking, so I did a lot of that for what limited mountain biking we had. And got into road racing, started kind of moving around, did a lot of bike touring, kind of found my way from shop to shop, and racing experience kind of followed that. Each new scene, whether it was Florida or Portland, Oregon, or DC or Martha's Vineyard or East Hampton, it was a new opportunity to kind of race different styles of racing, whatever was the flavor in that area. And I found cyclocross, and it really fit kind of all my strengths, and it was a lot of fun, so I stuck with it.
Yeah, so it fit all your strengths because you had that background in BMX and you definitely knew how to ride a bike and handle a bike. Is that what attracted you to the sport the most?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think like BMX, it's you're pushing the bike out of its normal boundaries, right? Like in theory, the bike will do anything you want it to do, no matter what bike, right? Like if you can kind of will it to happen, the bike can do anything you want to do. And so that was, the whole premise of BMX. It's like you're transforming, you're taking this bike and you're literally just forcing your will on it to make it happen. And with mountain biking, it's, you're going speeds that are kind of limited by the bike. And with road racing, the same thing. The bikes are kind of fragile, but then you kind of beef up a road bike a little bit, and all of a sudden you're pushing it way beyond its boundaries, and that was very natural to me. It just felt right. I was like, okay, cool, let's go thrash this thing around. And yeah, in the kind of natural bike handling, and it's that muscle memory that comes into effect that you can fix fitness, but the handling takes a long time to build. So I was just kind of naturally, all right, this is great, this is awesome.
No. Okay, so can you talk a bit about your progression and like from starting cyclocross to then making it to the elite level and winning that first national championship back in early 2017?
Yeah, it was a pretty it's cycling has always been a pretty outside of the BMX aspect of it, it's always been a pretty quick ascent. Like it's as soon as I got into mountain biking, I won my first race. Same thing with road racing. Like I got in the lower categories and I was just winning races. Kind of went up pretty quickly, and then I would take these breaks from a year or something like that and jump back in. And whatever category I was in just kind of coincided with how much I loved riding bikes at the time. And then I would just kind of, I always had good results, and I moved quickly through just any categories that I got into. And the same with cyclocross. So as soon as I got on it, it was just like every 2 races I was upgrading to a different category, and then I kind of stalled out once I was like a category 2 and did some moving around, and it started, I was in my mid-20s then, and I started looking at more work for shops and more responsibility in that. And then I found somebody that a boss of mine that would also coach me a little bit, and got me out of Florida, and I moved out to Massachusetts and on Martha's Vineyard, and I was working in the summers, and it just happened that I could work really hard in the summer, make some money, train on the side, and focus on the winter because I didn't have to have a job to sustain myself. So I could just kind of squirrel away some cash, and I would live in my wagon, and that kind of put cyclocross on the radar for me. And I was like, okay, well maybe if I actually try, I could make this a job. If I really, really try and I really put like my nose to the grindstone and kind of give it some effort and put off a few other things and, put off work for a year and see what happens, kind of make that commitment. And I did. I found a few people that were willing to kind of give me references over to the Jam Fund with my now still coach, Alec Donahue. And sorry, my computer's doing something funny. And I ended up, through a couple of references out in Western Mass, joined the Jam Fund, and kind of rest is history. He pushed me, Al pushed me into road racing, and kind of using cyclocross as like a way into the professional ranks, as like, okay, we know what to do with cyclocross. We know how to produce a cyclocross athlete, and it's a much easier and a smaller pool. It's a much easier way to kind of get an athlete noticed and get them onto a road program or something like that. And so it was like, okay, this is a very quick and easy way to make it happen. I was like all on board with it. And that's how I got on a road program, and kind of the rest is history with that.
Yeah, okay. So you had a bit of a, I don't know if you can call it a rivalry, probably you could, with Jeremy Powers there in these first couple of years. He was like maybe after Jonathan Page, the next big American cyclocross rider here in Europe on the World Cup circuit and all the big cyclocross races here in Belgium.
Yep.
He was a bit like a mentor to you. Is that correct? Yeah,
he was. I mean, so he was the J in Jam Fund. It was Jeremy, Alec, and Mukunda. And so, I got early on, when he was winning a lot, and he was, in his second national championships, I think, when I met him. I was absolutely, he was a lot of a mentor to me. And my first time in Europe, my first time in Belgium, it was a lot of like orchestrating with him how it was going to happen. Here's the contacts, and this is where to stay. And we live, back then we lived less than a mile from each other. We lived like 2 miles from each other. So we probably saw each other a lot more back then, but now that we're on the road all the time. And that's when he was really kind of finding his rhythm in Europe racing. And he was a great guy to look up to then, and still is. And but really showed me a very interesting pathway into European racing. Whether it worked for me 100%, it's up for debate. But it certainly showed me that it's possible to go over and have some results and have fun doing it.
Yeah. So what do you think makes such a difference between cyclocross in the US, where I think it is a bit of a booming sport these last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming over to Belgium, and which is the mecca of cyclo-cross, and it's a sport that has been dominated by Belgians and people from the Netherlands. Why do you think it's so hard for other riders like yourselves to come in and race for podium spots here?
Well, I think, I mean, honestly, for a lot of guys and girls, it's racing for a finishing time. That's the difference. Is you're racing for top tens in the U.S. and all of a sudden you're not finishing on the lead lap here. It's not even podium. But I think the main difference is time. Like Paige wasn't an amazing cross racer when he came to Europe. He wasn't. Like he was a pretty he was a top 10, mediocre elite male cyclist. And when he came over to Europe, he transformed himself and then became the two-time national champion that he is, and got those results later on. So I think it's time. It's absolutely time. And he was willing to move his family over and start fresh over there and take that chance. And he did it for a lot of years. Mm-hmm. And it showed. It was consistently getting better and better and better and better.
So it's a bit of a lack of quality within the US that you're not able to race that high level all the time.
Not just the quality, but the conditions are different in a lot of ways. And I mean, it doesn't seem, going from Belgium to the US, it doesn't seem like conditions are going to matter that much, because you're going from this very difficult, very slick, very soft, changing ground. Then you come to the US and it's hard. There's a lot of rocks. You don't sink. It doesn't make a rut ever. Never makes a rut. You go from racing on the fresh course, where you might have 3 races ahead of you, which are all pretty skilled people, to racing on at the end of the day, where all of the amateur and age group categories have raced that day. So there's no great line. It's all pretty blown out course. You get kind of the worst of it. And so you go from kind of have this hard ground that never really breaks loose, that never really forms a rut, that never really does anything but stays bumpy. And then you have to go race in super slick conditions on essentially a different sport. I mean, when you change the ground as much as you actually do, precipitation doesn't really matter, because it can rain all you want in the US and it still won't dig into the ground. Mm-hmm. It might get wet, but that's about it. So we do all of this racing throughout the year, and then all of a sudden we're switching to a different type of ground to race on, and it's difficult. It's very difficult. Yeah. So it just takes time to get over there and remember what it's like, and form new habits, and really it's a different skill to ride in those conditions.
So skill and also the material that you use, the type of tires and stuff like that, becomes much more important when you're here in Belgium.
Different pressures, different gearing. Not just for the speed, but I notice a huge difference when I run a bigger gear. I run a bigger chainring in Europe. I run a smaller cassette and a bigger chainring in the racing there. And it's not just the top end speed, but it's traction. I don't fight for traction in the US. The only time I fight for traction in the US is when it's dry and there's broken grass and dust. When I get over there, I can't get traction. You just can't get out of a corner without your tire spinning, no matter what pressure you're running. So you got to run a really big gear to be able to stay on top of it and kind of float your body on top of the pedals to actually gain some traction. It's those little differences that can make or break your racing over there.
Yeah, okay. Can you talk a bit about your relationship that you have with Wout van Aert? He's the current reigning cyclocross world champion. You guys train quite often together. Does he help you as well with choice of materials to use and gears and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, he's we don't train that much together, but we certainly have, and he's a great guy, first of all, and for such a young guy. I mean, he's just got a wealth of experience and knowledge, from racing from such a young age and in the heart of it. Mm-hmm. He's got a great head on his shoulders. really calm, really like focused, unbelievably focused. And it's really cool to like take my experiences, take his experiences, and kind of see what works, see what doesn't work, use some of his equipment knowledge that I wouldn't necessarily even think of. A lot of the tire choices, like I come up with 3 or 4 sets of tires and like this is what I'm going to run. They're swapping out like different width tires and all these things, and so all these special tires I don't even heard of. There's a lot more intricacy to it that it's such a shock to the system coming over that you're like, okay, I can I can only handle so much. I can only handle swapping some things over. Some people even like I'm happy just changing like the type of tires I use or the gearing, but some people even change their position when they come over on the bike themselves, like push the saddle back a little bit more to get more traction and kind of be more of a tractor pull rider. I don't find that beneficial, but yeah, he's been a big help with that stuff. I'm not afraid to, never been afraid to go up to riders that I look up to or revere and ask them like, hey, how are you riding this section? They might not, some of them don't understand English and I don't speak Dutch, so there's often a barrier, but most of them do speak English, and it's hugely helpful for me. I have to admit, I mean, it's such a relief when I talk to somebody and they can speak to me and I'm like, oh man, this is awesome. Great. And generally, everybo's been really cool that I've talked to. And they're like, oh, I think I'm going to take this line. This line looks better. Or, I'm running a 1.8 bar or whatever in their tires. And, I got to do the translation of PSI, but it's cool to be able to talk to these people in Wout, especially, and just be like, hey man, what's going on? How do you ride this course? Like how do you, what's the rhythm here? Where do you go hard? Where do you rest? Sometimes like before nationals, I had a big, this year before nationals, I had some bad tendonitis in my knee, my patella, and I had to cut my leg warmer out. I had to see 3 different physiotherapists to get it rolling. And he was like, hey, don't worry about it. I had the same thing before World Championships last year, and I still won. You're gonna be fine. You're still fit. Just focus on recovering, and you have 1 more day of pedaling hard. That's all you got to do. And it paid off. It really was like, actually, thanks. That helps a lot. So yeah, it's great having him around.
Yeah. He definitely knows what he's talking about, and he had it spot on this season as well. I mean, I think Mathieu van der Poel really dominated the season with 32 or 33 wins at the end.
Yep.
But Wout was able to come out on that one day that really mattered, on the World Championship day, and he got to retain that World Champion jersey. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's another thing to just look at that scenario and say, he's got everything to lose, right? And he's the world champion, he's the Belgian national champion, and, he's the Belgium's golden child right now, right? Mm-hmm. And so, to be demoralized, more or less, by a guy ripping the best guy in the world by a minute on a course, it's demoralizing. But to go out there every day and just still fight and fight and fight and fight and fight and fight, that's pretty incredible. That takes a lot of mental strength, So that's another cool thing to look at and just be like, oh wow, he's fighting really, really hard. How hard am I fighting?
Yeah. So you've been coming to Belgium, a couple of seasons now. Can you talk a bit about how that evolved and what are your goals for the next couple of seasons racing here in Belgium?
Yeah, I just finished up my 4th season, and 3rd as a professional, and the first I came over on my own, and I stayed in Izegem, Belgium, and the kind of pretty standard American inroad was you go to Izegem and then you race the Flandern races, and every year I've set goals, and I've ticked off those goals. I've set attainable goals and worked really, really hard, and through my coach and the people around me have really broken down my racing and living and traveling, and made it easier and easier and easier for myself. And really, most of my training is not for the U.S. racing. Most of my training is to prepare me for the European racing. It just happens to still be good for the U.S. stuff. Mm-hmm. every year I've gotten a better result at World Championships. Every year I've got, on average, better results in the World Cups. And the two national championships have helped out a lot. And so I hope I can get a couple more years of progression out of that. And honestly, the first 2 years was really hard of being like, okay, 1 or 2 places in a race year after year is a goal worthy of following. Going from top 20 to top 10 to podiums it's awesome. It feels great. Fighting for a year to get 2 more places, that's a little more difficult to do, especially when you're not close to the top 3, when you're fighting for like sometimes 20th or 15th or 10th. So it's taken me a couple of years to be really, really like, okay, my goal is to get 2 more places ahead or 5 more places ahead on a big day. And I'm happy with that now. Now I get super excited about that. And so going from, what was it? 26th, 23rd, 20th to 14th or something like that at Zolder. I mean, I'm totally fine with that progression. And if I got, if I went from 14th to 12th, that's a huge progression for me. I'm totally happy with that. So if I can do 2 more spots or 5 more spots next year or the each year after this, I'll be super happy. And when that slows down, we'll consider just staying home.
Yeah. Well, when you said you're 30 years old, I think power is definitely important in cyclo-cross. So you still have a couple of years left where you're able to make some progress, right?
Absolutely. And with cyclo-cross, I think it's important to have a lot of power, but it's just as important to be able to ride your bike in the conditions. And you can have all the power in the world, but if you're on the wrong tires at the wrong pressure and can't ride a rut, then you're not going anywhere. So, as I do everything I can to increase my power, but I know that my biggest inroads are going to be with bike handling and with just generally being more comfortable, and fighting a little bit harder than I'm used to. So mental preparation is huge for me. Okay. And just being able to stay calm. That's honestly, my power hasn't increased that much, but my ability to stay calm in races and to know that I actually belong there and not feel like a guest racing, not feel like an imposter racing has made the biggest difference to me. That's 10 spots. Just realizing that you belong there. That's 10 spots.
Was that something that you felt in the beginning?
Oh, absolutely. I was terrified. I mean, you have this history of riders coming over from the U.S. and going like, oh man, those guys, they, and you don't count yourself among them. So you're all these legends, and then all of a sudden you come over and you're in it. You're just giving away spots left and right. You're like, well, of course I got dropped. Like, of course, of course these guys are way better than me. But, at some point you got to realize like, no, they're people. They're just people on bikes just like you are. And they're fighting just as hard as you are. So you got to insert yourself. And, they probably certainly don't think of you the way you think of you. They think, oh, that's another guy to race. You have to think of them as another person to race. And when you start doing that, the game changes.
Yeah. Like, it doesn't really sound that American that you guys come over here and be humble.
It's terrifying. You look at this like sport that for the Americans, Belgium is the holy land, and it's where cyclocross is. Mm-hmm. Doing cyclocross in the U.S., everything from like how people name, quote features on courses like stairs or everything is related to Belgium. Oh, you ride cyclocross? Oh, you probably like Belgian beer. Oh, you love waffles? That's great. Oh yeah, you have like a Belgian national jersey? That's cool. Like, so it's just this mystique around it. And then you go over there, you're like, oh, I'm going to go over there and race. And then you're like, oh, that just got real, So it's interesting. This culture builds around this, like the mystique of the Belgian cross racer. I mean, literally, that's it. It's subtle, but it's there.
Yeah, in one way, I think we're all wanting it to become a much more international sport, and I think we at least the organizations, they welcome athletes from other countries, as long as you guys don't start becoming world champion.
But then we'll have to talk.
then we'll probably kick you out again.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we'll have that problem for a little while, at least in the men's categories. But it's the women.
Yeah, so you finished your winter season now and the cyclo-cross season. Like Wout van Aert, he's focusing on the spring classics here in the road. Mathieu van der Poel, he's probably going to do the mountain bike World Cups. So what are your plans for the summer?
So my plans for the summer is it's kind of the our first foray into a sub racing team of the cyclo-cross program. It's pretty typical and pretty common in Europe and in Belgium to, you have Crelon or Vested Service or whoever is going to have their cyclo-cross team, but also a road team attached to that. And that's just transition between those two. One's for training, one's for racing. You have people that focus on either one. That's not common in the US. Every now and then you had teams like Rally or somebody like that would bring in a couple of specialists, and they're like, well, we have some tents and we have a mechanic. Like, we'll just pay him year round, and then just, maybe 2 athletes will go do that. But it's not common outside of that. And I've been pushing for a couple of years now to stay on board and stop getting kind of, 2 contracts a year of like, okay, when cyclocross is over in February, then what am I going to do? Okay, I got to go over to this program. I got to be on a different bike, and I got to be, doing all these things and different sponsors, and then you got to integrate back. And so, me and Cannondale and cyclocrossworld.com are doing our own mountain bike program this year, mostly domestic. I'll do 1 World Cup this year. For me, I didn't want to race road anymore. I love mountain bike racing. I've always wanted to race mountain bikes as a professional. And I happened to get a chance to race road. And I went that direction, and it got me a job, and it got me a lot of experience, and got me on the road, and got me where I am now, and that's great. But I'm ready to get back on the mountain bike. With the 2020 Olympics coming up, I think it's a great time, and I think, I would regret it immensely if I didn't try to go to the Olympics for something. And I have the opportunity, and I have the support to do it, so that's my big goal, and I think the program's goal is to try my hardest to get on a spot for the 2020 cross-country Olympics. Cyclocross isn't going to be in the Olympics in my career. I don't see that happening. And if it was, I'd be a shoe-in for the U.S. That would be great, but it's not. So being realistic, I think I have to kind of set my goals a little broader and try and figure out how to make that work. I'm not Mathieu van der Poel. I can't jump in and go from 150th to the front of the group. So it's going to be a little bit different for me, and it's going to be a little more, precision focused. I'm going to have to pick exact races to go to that are going to have to work out really well for me, and kind of do the minimum effective dose of racing to get it done. No. So I'm excited to do it, though.
So that's going to be your main focus for the next couple of years. So does that mean cyclocross is taking a bit of a backseat in next winter, maybe?
So it's tough to kind of do both of them. When Todd Wells was U.S. national champion, our national championships was in December. And he was able to do that and then do cyclocross for a little while through December, and then stop, do his break, and go into the mountain bike season and have a successful mountain bike season. I'm not going to do it quite that way. I'm not going to take that many races off. But yeah, I will. I will take a few more races off over the next 2 years to get ready for cross races off, to get ready for mountain bikes. And when all that's over, we'll go right back to the way it was.
So after 2020, it's back to cyclocross. Is that where your heart is?
Yeah. It's a hard way to do it, but I got to try somehow.
Yeah, good luck with that. We'll keep an eye out on your progression, and good luck with it.
Appreciate that.
So you've been racing a couple of years now. What do you see as your biggest achievement in your cycling career, and what do you see as your biggest disappointment?
Let's see. That's a good one. Finishing off the national championships for the second time was a massive achievement for me. I mean, one time is difficult to do with the season I was having. It was kind of expected, I think, from a lot of people. I mean, I don't think I've ever talked to anybody that was like, oh, I had my money on someone else last year, So that was something, and I was not exactly an underdog, but also I didn't have anything to lose. I wasn't a national champion, so it wasn't. I just had to fight for it. This year, as kind of a lot more expectation on me and expectation from myself, and just thinking like, hey, I don't want to be a one-hit wonder on this. Like I want to show that I can do it again. And that was a lot. And then there was a lot of things that happened beforehand. There was a lot of injury and a lot of little hiccups that happened leading into it, and not seeing any of the other racers because I was the only male that went to nationals that was racing in Europe. Everyone else was at home doing maybe a race or two, but all training to beat me. So it was difficult. That was terrifying. So being able to pull that off and having Jeremy going as good as he was at the end of that race, that was honestly probably my biggest accomplishment yet. But I've had some really good, I've had an 11th at a World Cup, and I've had a 10th at a Super Prestige, a couple of other high results like that I'm really, really proud of. I mean, as far as my worst result or memory from it, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've done a really good job at taking a lot of positives from every experience that I've had. I really, 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 really build off of those positive experiences, and I try. My ultimate goal is to not let those shortcomings be failures, but actually get something out of them. Be able to walk away from even the worst experience. Zaven, I dropped out of Zaven. I had 3 pretty bad crashes. Unfortunately, none of them were caused by me. So I was frustrated. I had like a little injury going on my foot, and with all that running, it was a really bad day. And I came out of that, and I dropped out of the race. And I said to my mechanic, I was like, hey, I'm sorry. I don't drop out of races. I've had enough. And this is after Bohinsa, where I had a mechanical in the first lap. And it was a really rough period. And my teammate, Katie, crashed on the first lap. Her bottom of her shoe came off with 3 laps to go, and she still rode into the top 10. And I looked at that, and I was like, that's the most incredible thing I've ever seen, and I feel terrible for dropping out of that race. And so it really put it into perspective for me. It was a terrible day, but what I really got out of that was like, I didn't need to do that. And I have more to fight. I have more fight than that. So.
It's a pretty good mindset to have, that you're able to take something out of each race, whether it's a good one or a bad one.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, cool. Thanks for your time, Stephen. How can people get in touch with you if they want to?
So you can find me on. I don't check Twitter very often, but I am on there. Stephen T. Hyde. I'm pretty focused on Instagram most of the time. Stephen Hyde. I have a website, stephen-hyde.com. Facebook, normal stuff.
Yeah. Okay. I'll put those links up on the show notes page. Feel free to give some love to your sponsors.
Excellent. Yeah. CanadaCyclo-cross.com. They've been huge. Everyone associated with that. I'm very, very thankful to be part of that family. So.
Yeah, cool. I'll put those links up as well. Anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, no, I think we're good.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, one final question to finish it off. If you could sit on a bench and chat for an hour with someone from the past or the present, who would it be?
That's a very, very good question.
A cyclo-cross legend?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Man, I would love to sit down with Eddie Merckx.
Okay.
Wouldn't everybody? What's going on, man? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, that would be a good one.
Yeah.
Make sure to take a tape recorder with you, and I guess it'll make an excellent podcast.
Excellent.
All right, thanks for your time, Stephen. Much appreciated.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Junkies, you've reached the end of yet another episode of the Endurance Junkie podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening, and thanks to Stephen Hyde for coming on. Now, every listen means so much to me, so if you like this interview and think someone else would too, feel free to share it on your own social media channels. That would be awesome and very much appreciated. And if you have suggestions for possible future guests, you can always shoot me an email to peter@junkiepodcast.com, and I'll try to make that happen. Alright, thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll join me next time. Cheers, guys.